Somewhere on the Palatine Hill in Rome, scratched into plaster, there is a drawing of a man on a cross. It is the earliest surviving image we have of Jesus crucified. It was not made by a Christian. It was not made in devotion. It was made to humiliate someone. The figure on the cross has the head of a donkey. Beside it stands a smaller figure, one hand raised. Underneath, in rough Greek, someone has written, Alexamenos worships his god. It's a joke, graffiti, the ancient equivalent of scrawling something cruel about a classmate on a bathroom wall. And for a long time, that is the only kind of crucifixion image that existed. Because here is the part most people never hear. For roughly the first 300 years of Christianity, the cross was not a Christian symbol at all. Christians didn't wear it, they didn't carve it on their tombs, they didn't hang it where they met. The question is why, and the answer is not what you would expect. To understand why, you have to stop seeing the cross as a shape and start seeing it as a machine. Crucifixion was not simply execution. Rome had faster ways to kill people. It was designed to do something else. To make dying slow, public, and degrading. The condemned were stripped, fixed in place where everyone could see, and then it took hours, sometimes days. Rome was specific about who received it. Roman citizens were generally exempt. It was for slaves, for rebels. For people the empire wanted to erase publicly, as a warning to anyone considering the same. The pain was so distinctive it generated its own word, excruciating, from the Latin ex cruce, out of the cross. So imagine you are a Christian in the 2nd century. Crucifixion is not history, it is not a metaphor. It is happening, this year, in your city, to people you might know. Now imagine wearing a small silver one around your neck. They weren't symbol-less. Early Christians had a rich visual language, it simply didn't include a cross. They used a fish. The Greek word ichthyes worked as an acronym. Isus Christos Theouios Soter, Jesus Christ, God's Son, Savior. An entire creed, folded into one ordinary shape, you could draw in the dirt. They used an anchor, for hope and for holding fast. It appears again and again on tombs and inscriptions. They used the Chi-Rho, the first 2 Greek letters of Christos, laid over one another. And we know this wasn't accidental, because someone wrote the list down. In the 2nd century, Clement of Alexandria advised Christians on what images were appropriate to engrave on a signet ring. The thing you'd press into wax to seal a letter, the closest thing they had to a personal logo. His list: a dove, a fish, a ship, a lyre, an anchor. No cross. A Christian teacher, writing to Christians, listing the symbols of the faith, and the cross does not appear. Which brings us back to that scratched wall. The Alexamenos Graffito is dated somewhere between the 1st and 3rd centuries, and it tells you something no theological text can. It tells you what the cross looked like to everyone else. Because the joke only works if crucifixion is shameful. You cannot mock someone for worshiping a crucified man unless being crucified is understood, universally, as the most degrading thing that can happen to a person. The donkey's head sharpens it further. A stock insult used to suggest something foreign and ridiculous. So the earliest crucifixion images we have are not Christian art, they are pagan taunts. That is the direction the imagery ran for centuries, not from believers outward, but from opponents inward. And there is something quietly remarkable about the graffito, though we will never know the details. Someone named Alexamenos existed. Someone thought his faith was funny enough to draw on a wall. And that piece of mockery is now one of the most studied artifacts in early Christian archaeology, while the person who drew it is completely anonymous. Then something changed, not in theology but in law. In the 4th century, Constantine abolished crucifixion across the Roman Empire. The practice stopped, and within a generation or two, an entire population grew up for whom the cross was no longer something happening down the road. It became something that used to happen. That is the hinge, not a doctrine, not a council, a change in what the shape meant when you saw it. While crucifixion was live, the cross was a gallows. Once it stopped, the cross could become a memory, and a memory can become a symbol. Even then, it wasn't immediate. Christians did not widely produce explicit images of the crucifixion until roughly the 5th century, around 400 years after the event itself. Think about the scale of that. 4 centuries of Christianity, its persecutions, its councils, its theology, its spread across an empire. Largely without the image we now treat as its definition. The symbol we consider inseparable from the faith arrived late, and slowly, and only once it was safe. One more thing, once you start noticing crosses. Some have a body on them, some don't. The crucifix, with the figure of Christ, is most associated with Catholic and Orthodox tradition. It holds attention on the death itself. This happened to a real body. The empty cross is more common in Protestant churches, emphasizing what came after, the tomb that didn't hold. Same shape, 2 different moments in the story, neither is a decoration. So why did it take 300 years? Not because early Christians were ashamed of the crucifixion. They preached it constantly. It is everywhere in the earliest letters we have. The reason is simpler and more human. You cannot wear a gallows as jewelry while the gallows is still in use. They needed distance. They needed the thing to stop being a threat before it could become a symbol. And once it did, they didn't choose something gentler. They took the instrument that had been used to humiliate them, the one strangers scratched on walls to make them a joke, and they made it the sign of the whole faith. Alexamenos never knew that. Whoever mocked him never knew it either. But the drawing survived, and so did the symbol.